Hi, thanks for joining the course and welcome to your very first lecture on Python programming language. In this lecture, let's see how you can install the Python package through which you're going to be running your scripts throughout this course. And with that said, let's get started. So first off, open up your browser and go to python.org, and then you need to download a latest version of the package. Now if you're watching this video a bit later, you might have a different version, but for now the latest version is Python 3.5. And when you're downloading the Python versions, you might have to go through the release notes because it's going to specify the new improvements and also the bug fixes they've done in the previous versions. And it also does the libraries, the version supports, because few version doesn't support certain libraries, so you might have to download the specific versions and then click on download Python 3.5. Now I'm not going to save this file on my system because I already installed the Python package, but you might have to save the file and then go through the installation process. Now once you have done the installation, you might see something like idle Python 3.5 32-bit. So just open that and then you should be seeing an interface like this. Now just type print, then two parentheses, and then within that two speech marks, and then type hello world. I'm not going to go too complicated stuff in this tutorial, just very basic and simple. Just type hello world and then press enter. Now if you see the output as hello world, then you're good to go. That means you've installed it properly. That's all for this lecture. Hopefully I'll see you in my next lecture by introducing you to numbers in Python. Hi, welcome to your second lecture in this course, and in this lecture let's talk about numbers and math functions you can use in Python. Now we're still using the same GUI interface for entering your code, and on this if you want to do a simple addition, you just need to type 2 plus 2 and then that'll give you an answer. And you can do the same thing for subtraction. You can just write 2 minus 2 and then that'll give you an answer. And you can do the same thing for the multiplication and division, but what I need to talk about is the modular sign, which is just the percentage symbol. Now this comes really handy when you're doing proper programming or you building an application. What this basically means is that it divides a number and then it outputs the remainder of that division. For example, if you type 21 mod 7, that'll give you 0 because 21 is divisible by 7. But if you do the same thing with 8, that will give you answer as 5 because that's the remainder. And what also I need to talk about is the powers and exponents. Now, if you have a math equation where you need to uh, do you have a number like 2 power 3 where you have to do 2 times 2 times 2, well you can do that. You can write 2 times 2 times 2, but there is also a simple way in Python which can be used to do the same thing. You just need to write 2 and then 2 stars and then whatever the number it has to um, multiply with or times with. If it's 3, then it will give you the same answer. If you can just do the same thing with 5 and bam, that there's the answer. So these are you use powers and exponents in Python. And that's all for this lecture. It's a very simple introduction to math and numbers in Python. In our next lecture, let's see how you can use variables in this language. Hi, welcome to your third lecture in this course, and in this course I'm going to talk about the variables. And for those of you who doesn't know what variable is or never programmed in any other language, here you go. The variables are certain names and letters which can be used to store as temporary value, and these variables can be used to make further operations using them in throughout your program. With that said, let's get started. So first off, to create a variable you need to have a name, and a very basic thing is what you use is x is equals to, oh there you go my keyboard, x is equals to the value, let's say 2, and then you press enter. Now you can use x instead of 2 in any of your operations. Let's do a simple addition by doing x plus 2, and then they get the answer which is 4. 2 plus 2 is 4. You can also do the same thing with multiplication, and you get the same. So these are you use variables and to do certain operations. Now you might be thinking, why do you use x? You can just use 2. Why do you need to store it in a variable with a simple waste of time? Well, in this case, you're right, but in certain programs, you need to store the value in variables because you might not know what the value would be, and when that value is stored in the variable, you can access it. For example, when you're getting a value from a user and then having certain operations based on that value. So to do that, you need to use the same syntax as equals to, but here you need to use an inbuilt function within Python which is called input. So just write input and then two parentheses, and then within that we need to write a simple message to the user, and this is what is going to be showed on the terminal for the user to enter. Just write enter the number, and then in Python version 3.x, the input function is a bit changed, so it returns a string. Now when the user is entering a number, it should be int or float. It can't be a string to carry out certain operations, and for that you need to use another function which is called int. So you just need to bind this whole input function with an int, and then you press enter. So now it's asking enter the number, so just write any number, and then now that value is stored within x. Now from here you can again carry out certain operations. You can just write x plus 10, or you can just write x into 2. You have different values. So this is how you use variables within Python, and hopefully you now understand what is variables, numbers, math, and different kinds of data types like int and float. Hi, welcome to your fourth lecture in this course, and in this lecture I'm going to talk about functions and modules. Now if you remember me saying the word function in my previous lecture, what I mean is that a function is a set of instructions which are already pre-written, and that can be used again and again within the program, and without having to specify each and every instruction again, and this makes the programmer's life easy. Now the function can be predefined by the package, or it can also be user defined, which means the programmer can specify the function name and also the set of instructions. With that said, let's get started. So first off, if you remember the way we calculated the exponents and powers of a number, we did it by using two asterisks and the power. Well, you can also do this by using a function, and for this we have a function called POW, and you need to send the parameters to solve the problem. Well, the parameters is a piece of information that is used by the function to solve the problem, and this function needs two parameters. One is base and then the power, and that gives the answer same. Well, so that's more about what is a function. Now let's see what is a module. Now module is also called as a library. This library contains a set of different functions which can be used by the programmer. Now to use the library or use the function within the library, you need to import the module, and for that you're going to use the command import. So just write import and then the library name. And for this example, let's take a look at the math library. So just write import math, then press enter. So now that you have imported the math module, you can use all the functions which are within this module. For example, if you want to calculate the square root of certain number, just type math and enter a period, and then start typing this function name. So that gives you 9. So square root of 81 is 9. Now remember, if you're using a function within a library, you need to specify the library and then you need to enter the period so that you know different functions within the library. So these are the functions which are already there within this library. We can also use factorial, then type 5. So factorial of 5 is 120. So this is how you use modules and functions. So now that you've understood what is variable functions and everything else, let's take a look at how you can start writing your program and saving it to a file in our next lecture. Hi, welcome to your fifth lecture in this course. And in this lecture, I'm going to be talking about how you can save your script onto your file and then treat it as a regular program. Now, if you have noticed in our previous lecture, we've been using this GUI interface. Now, it's really good for testing purpose, but on the other hand, it doesn't save the code or script. So whenever you restart, you need to re-enter all your script again. So it doesn't make sense if you can't save your program, right? But that's what we're going to see in this lecture. So we're going to see how you can save the script onto a new file. With that said, let's get started. So first off, when you open up your idle shell, go into the file and then click on new file. So this is the window which allows you to run and also save your Python script. So let's just type something really quick. Just type print hey there and then save this file. Let me just save this on my desktop. First, you need to specify a name for your Python file. So let me just keep it as hey dot, and then after the file name, you need to add a period, and then you need to give the extension as py. So that that says the Python, that says the Windows as that this file should be executed through a Python package, and also it says that this file should be treated as a Python script. So that's quite important. And then click save. Now you can go to run and then click on run module. So that's going to run through this idle. So this is how your program is executed. Let's just go back and then add a few more functions to your program. Let's just say um, name is equals to input, and then just give a small message, enter name, and then let's just print out hey name, and then save it, and then go to run from module. You can also just press F5. It's not quite exciting, just a small tab. So it's asking for the name. Let me just type my name. So it says hey Gautam. So this is what we did on your program. We asked the user to enter their name and then saved it to a new variable called name, and then we printed out hey, and then we add this plus sign which will concatenate the variable and the text. So that's gonna print hey and the name which they entered. You can also go back to the folder where you had saved the file, and then here you see your file. You can also treat it as a regular program. You can just double click on it and then it'll open up a terminal, then executes the program. So it's asking for the name, and then when you enter the name, oh, what happened? But it did execute the program, but what happened is that it didn't stop for the next instruction. So what you can do is you can just write input and then write press enter, then save it, then reopen it again. So now you can see the output. So when you press enter, that's going to close. So this is how you can save Python script onto your file and then save it and also run it as a regular program. Hi, welcome to your sixth lecture in this course. And in this lecture, I'm going to be talking about strings. Well, you might have heard me saying the word string a bunch of times in the previous videos, but in this lecture, let's talk more about what are the strings and what are the different scenarios where you can use them properly. But with that said, let's get started. So first off, string is a set of characters which are together. For example, if you just type hey there, that's a string because it's got a set of characters and they are together. But there are different scenarios where you can't use them in a regular way. For example, if you have a string which says he is a good person. So what this means for a Python compiler is that this is the start of the string and this is the end of the string. And what is this? So it doesn't understand what the last quote is. So you need to specify the compiler that this whole word or this whole bunch of letters is one sentence and that should be printed out. So what you need to use for that is a backspace character, which is also called as escape character, and that is the backspace. So what this says the compiler is that whatever the next word or the next letter is, just ignore it. So it just prints it out blindly. The compiler just prints out the word or the letter which is after the backspace blindly. It doesn't take that into account. So when you press enter, that's gonna print it. That's gonna output the whole sentence as one string. So this is one case scenario which I wanted to talk in this lecture. And the next thing is the concatenation of two strings. Well, you might have seen in the previous video where we tried a plus symbol used to concatenate one string into another string. So we're going to do the same thing here. So we have a variable called a, and it says first name, and then b is equals to last name. So you have two variables which store two different strings. Now if you want to concatenate this, you just have to type a plus b, and that's going to concatenate both of those variables and then output as a single word. You can also make it much more clear by just saying a is equals to first name with the space, so that will make it much more clear when it's outputting the format. So this is how you're going to use strings, and there are the different scenarios where you have to use backspace character. Hi, welcome to your seventh lecture in this course, and in this lecture I'm going to be talking more about strings. Well, now that you have understood what is a string and how it can be used in different scenarios from the previous lecture, in this lecture let's have another scenario where again you have to use the string in different way to comply with that scenario. With that said, let's get started. So the scenario which I'm talking about is the integer and the string. So for example, if you have to print out a string and concatenate an integer with that string, you can't do it directly. For example, if you have a variable called a and which stores the value 18, you can't just print out the value and the string together. Let's see what happens when you try doing that. If you have string is plus a, it can't do it because it can't concatenate a string and an integer. So how do you do it from converting an integer into a string? And for that we have a function called as str, and you can use it. So it's, and this is the way you do it. A equals to str, then you put two parentheses and you send the value as a parameter to that function. So in this case it's 18. When you press enter, then when you try printing it out again, here is plus a, it prints it out because it converts the integer into a string. So this is how you use a string function to convert an integer into a string and then use it to concatenate to another string. So that's all for this lecture. That's all about the strings and different case scenarios. And hopefully in our next lecture, let's talk more about the sequences list and the inputs. Hi, welcome to our 8th tutorial in this course, and in this tutorial I'm going to be talking about sequences and lists. Now list is something which allows you to store the data in a sequential manner. Well, let me just quickly show you guys how to create a list so you'll understand what I'm saying. And to do that, you just need a name for the whole list. And for now I'm just going to keep it really simple. I'm just going to keep it as animals, and then you need to add two brackets, and then here this is where you're going to put all your data. Now each of this data is called as elements within the list, and for that, and you separate each of these elements with a comma. Dot get um, lion, right, tiger. You can add as many as elements you want in this list. So when you do that, the list is created. Now if you want to access each of these elements within this list, you need to specify it in a different manner. So you write animals, the list name, and then you add two brackets, and this is where you specify the the number of that element. For example, these elements in this list is ordered in a weird way, so it's quite weird. It's numbered from 0. This element is 0, 1, 2, and 3, so it doesn't start from 1, it starts from 0. So if you want to print out lion, then you have to say start from 0, 0, 1, and 2. So if you type animals and then 2, that's gonna print out lion. So this is how a list is numbered, and you can also or you can also count the elements from a reverse order, which is numbered from a negative number. So it starts from -1, -2, -3, and -4. It can't be -0 because -0 is nothing but 0, which doesn't make sense. So it starts from -1. For example, if you just type animals, then sorry, animals, and then write -2, that's gonna print line because it's -1 and -2. So this is all about sequences and lists in this tutorial. But in our next lecture, we'll talk more about tuples, and then also I'm gonna be showing you guys something really cool, so you might have to pay attention. And hopefully, I'll see you next lecture. Thank you. Hi, welcome to your ninth lecture in this course. And in this lecture, I'm going to be talking to you guys something called as slicing. Now, slicing is something, as the word says, it is used to slice down the list. Now, for example, if you have a really large data within a list and you want to separate the data within a certain numbers or um, certain group, then you can use this method called as slicing. Now it comes really handy and very useful when you're dealing with a very large data set. Let me just quickly show you guys how this is done so that you'll understand what I mean. So when you open up your interface, you first need a list for doing slicing. And for that, let me just quickly create an example list, and I'll call that as example to keep it simple. And then I'll just add numbers from 0 to 9. Right, so you have a list called as example, and it's got the elements from 0 to 9. So to do the slicing, so you need to write the name of the list, and then you need to add two brackets, and then first parameter is that you need to specify the number from which it has to start and then the number which it has to end. So for this example, let's just write 8, and then what it does is it prints out all the numbers between 2 and 8 except 8. So this is how you do slicing. You can also do this through a reverse order. As I said in the previous lecture, the elements within the list is also maintained through a reverse order through negative numbers. So you can again use the same principle. You can start from -5 to -1, and then you print out the same digits which are numbered from -5 to -1. So this is how you use slicing within a list. You can also use a quick tooltip to print out the complete list. You can just write enter and then print out the complete list. So these are, you can also print out a complete list, and also if you just uh, slicing it from the beginning till a certain number, you can use like this, or if you're printing it from 0 till the end, let's say 5 till end, so that'll print all the numbers from 5 till the end of the list. So this is how you do slicing with the list, and hope you guys have understood what is a list and how to do slicing and what is a sequence as well. Hi, welcome to the 11th lecture in this course. And in this lecture, I'm going to be talking to you guys about more functions which can be carried out on a list. And when I say more function, these are the functions which are used and very useful during your program, and also most commonly used as well. But with that said, let me just get started. So first off, the first function which I'm going to be talking to you guys about is the length function. So what this function does is that it takes a parameter which is your list and then calculates the length of that list. When I say the length of the list, I mean the number of elements within that list. Let me just quickly create a list. I'll just name that as numbers equals to um, 21, 30, 51, 57, 65, and then 40. So now you have a list called numbers. So to use the function length, you're going to write len and then you put two brackets, then write numbers. So that's going to return the number of elements within this list. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's one function which I want to talk. And the other function is that the max. So this is the function which returns the maximum value within your list. So just write numbers and percentile. So 87 is the maximum value that is in this list. When they created max, obviously they have created a minimum. So you can find out the minimum value within your list. So that's the minimum value you can search for within your list. So these are the functions which I want to talk in this lecture, and hopefully I'll put on more documents about more functions which you can carry out using list. And also I wanted to talk about another thing. I wanted to talk about the difference between the strings and the list. Now there is a function called list, and if you put a string into that, let's say Gautam, what that does is it converts that string into a list. It takes out each of the character in that string and put that as an element into a list. Now in this list, there are a lot of things you can do on the list, lot of operations you can do on the list than on the string, um, which I'm going to be showing you right now. For example, if you want to replace an element in a list, you can do that. So for example, now you have a list called numbers. If you want to replace an element, let's say 51 with 40, you can do that. You can write all of it again. But if you have a really large list, you can just specify the element number. So it's 0, 1, 2. So you write list name and then you reference it with the value, with the element number, and then you place it with the whichever value you want. So in this case 40. So if you write numbers again, so that's gonna replace that value in that specific index. So these are some of the operations you can do on the list, not on the string. And that's all for this lecture. Hopefully I'll see you guys in my next lecture. Hi, welcome to your 10th lecture in this course. And in this course, I'm going to be talking to you guys about sequences. Now, we've already learned what is sequence, but in this lecture, we'll be talking how you can carry out more operations using sequences. Now, what I mean by more operations is that unlike strings, sequences can also be concatenated. Let's say, for example, you have a sequence A with elements 1 to 10, and then you have a sequence B with the numbers 11 to 20. So if you want to concatenate these two sequences, you can do that. Let me just quickly show you guys how you can do that, and then you'll understand what I mean. So open up your interface and then create two new sequences. Let me just write A, A with 0, 1, 2, 3, and then B with 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So if we just write A plus B, then it's going to concatenate these two sequences, and then it will create a new sequence with all these elements. So that's how you concatenate two sequences. But if you do the same thing, or if you just try concatenating a sequence and a string, let's see what happens. So if you just write me, so it doesn't happen. So you can't concatenate two different data types. They both have to be similar data types to be concatenated. And another thing which I want to talk to you guys about is an inbuilt keyword within Python called in. Now, what this in does is that it searches for a specific letter or specific word within a sentence. Now, let me quickly show you guys how this is done. So let's create a variable called name is equals to Gautam, and then let's see if you can search a certain letter within this variable. Let's see K in name. So what it does is it will check whether K, the letter K, is in this variable. So it's false because the K is not in any of this letter. Let's try another one. Let's try G and name. So that gives you true because the letter G is in the variable name. So that's all I wanted to talk to you guys in this lecture, and hopefully let's talk more about Python functions and different definitions in our next upcoming tutorials. Hi, in this lecture I'm going to be showing you guys how to do more operations on the list using slicing. In one of our previous lecture, we used the slicing concept to retrieve or output the list of elements in the list on the output screen. But in this lecture, I'm going to be showing you guys how to replace a number of elements in the list in one go, and also I'm going to be showing you guys how to add multiple elements into list, or also you can delete multiple elements in the list using the same slicing concept. So let me just quickly show you guys how this is done so you know what I'm talking about. So open up your Python GUI and then quickly create a new list. So I'm just going to call it as example, and then I'm going to use the list function to convert a word. So I'm just going to write simple book for now and then press enter. So let me just quickly see how the list is now. So it took each and every letter from the word and then it made that as an element within the list example. So let me just quickly calculate the length of the list. So it's 10 numbers, 10 elements. So using slicing, you can replace a certain number of elements. For example, if you want to replace the elements from book, starting from B till K, then you just have to type example, the list name, and then two brackets. Then you need to specify the index. So let's count it from here. It's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you can include 6 and then till the end, and then you're gonna specify the word. So I'm just gonna write list. Let me just write Mike. It's just 4 letters. Yeah, and then press enter. So if you output the list again, you can see the elements have been replaced by the different word. Now it doesn't have to be a similar length, it doesn't have to be 4 letters, or it doesn't have to be 4 elements. It can be a larger number or a smaller word. For example, if you just write example and then you select the same index and then list, and then you need to type the word. Let me just for now balloon. I have no idea how I'm choosing these words, but yeah. Right, so this is how it works. So you can add multiple elements to your list in one go, and it can also delete in the same way. So for deleting the elements from your list, you just need to write the list name and then specify the index, and then you just need to write empty brackets. So if you do that, that's going to delete all the elements from the index number 5 till the end. So these are very useful operations which can be used in your regular programming. And it comes really handy when you're dealing with obviously very large data type. So that's all for this lecture. Let's see what we can learn in our next lecture. Thank you. In this lecture, I'm going to be talking to you guys about something called as methods. Now, methods is some kind of function which can be used on certain objects. Unlike other functions which can be used independently, methods can't be used in that way. It has to be linked or it has to be related to an object to carry out its operation. Let me just quickly show you guys how this is done on Python so you'll understand it much better. Open up your Python shell, and then I'm just gonna quickly create a new example object and to show you some of the methods which can be used on it. So I'm just gonna call it as example and then add few elements such as computer, random, and then one large element, keyboard. Right. So to use a method on an object, you first need to write the object name, example, and then you need to add a period. So that's going to specify you're going to use a method on this specific object. And these are the objects which can be used on this, these are the methods which can be used on this object. So firstly, we'll check out the append method. Just write the example and then append. So what this method does is it appends or it adds a new element on the end of a new list or end of the object. So you're gonna specify the parameter as the new element. For this example, I'm just gonna keep it as um, random again. So if you see the list, you can see that the new element has been added at the end of the object. So that's what the append method does. Let's take a look at another method called count, and for that I'm going to create a new object and I'm going to add a few elements. Right, so I've got the object called as numbers, and then I'm going to use a method called as count. So write count and then add two parentheses, and the parameter is that element which has to be searched. So what count does is it checks or it searches how many times a certain element has been repeated in an object or in a list. So in this example, let me just take 3 and then see how many times it has been repeated. Well, 3 is repeated 3 times, so I'm just going to use 1. So it says 1 has been repeated 2 times in this list. So this is how it works. It checks the first element, so that's 1, 2, and then nope, 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 and the rest of them is false, so it returns false. So that's how the count method works on an object. The one last method which I wanted to talk to you guys is called extend. So that's going to extend two objects or two lists into one single list. Now obviously you can do it this way. You can write numbers equals to numbers, or you can write example plus numbers, and then when you display it, it adds or it appends two list into one list. You can also do it by using the extend method. So if you write numbers and type extend and then you write example, that's gonna append example list at the end of numbers. So you type enter, then write numbers, you can see the list has been added up. So this is how you're going to use methods on different objects. So this is just a very basic introduction into what are methods and how it can be used. In our upcoming lectures we'll learn more about objects and how to create objects user defined and also user defined methods. So that's all for this lecture, guys. Hopefully I'll see you guys in my next lecture. Thank you. In this lecture, I'm going to be talking to you guys about something called as if and else statements. In all our previous lectures or previous tutorials, you've learned the basic concepts and methodologies on Python programming. But from this lecture on, you'll be learning something very useful or something which would really help you to build real-world Python applications. So with that said, let's just jump in and get started. So firstly, open up your Python GUI interface and then go to File, New File. That's going to open up a new window for you where you're going to write all your Python scripts. You can save that and treat them as a regular program. If there's an error in your program, you can come back and recheck your code. So we're gonna use this window for the tutorials from now on. And let me quickly show you guys how the if and else statements syntax look like. So if you write if, so that's the keyword, and then you write the condition, then you add to a colon, then you write some instructions here. Let's say do something if it's true, and if it's false, you're gonna do something other than what you have done. If it's true, say something else. So this is the condition, or this is the syntax, how it looks like. Let me just quickly create a program for you guys to understand it much better. Let me create a new variable called a equals 1, and then if a is equals to 1, remember you have to put 2 equals to sign to compare between 1 and a. If you just put 1 equals to, that's going to give you an error because that's a assigning parameter, assigning operator. But if you put 2 equals to, that means it's comparing two variables or two values. So here you're going to write print, and then you're going to just simply say it's true for now. Let me just keep it simple so you'll understand it better. We'll create much more complicated programs in our upcoming tutorials though. And if it's false, you're gonna write it's false. So save that program. I'm gonna save it on my desktop. I'm gonna call it simple.py. Then go to run module. So it says it's true because a is equals to 1, which we have assigned in the first line, and then it checks if a equals to 1 and it's 1 and it's true, so it's gonna execute this instruction. Let's change the value. Let's make it 2, save it, then run module. It says it's false because a is not equals to 1 and it's false, so it's gonna print out this instruction. Let's just quickly create a new simple application. So what this application does is it checks whether the number is even or odd, and it returns whether it's even or odd. So to do that, you need to first get the input from the user, or you first need to get the number from the user. And for that, let me create a variable called number equals to int input. Let's say enter the number, and then you're gonna check whether the number is even. And to check if the number is even, you need the keyword if number ampersand 2 is equals to 0, then the number is even, because if a number is divisible by 2 and the remainder is 0, that's obviously even. So you're gonna print the number is even, and if it's not even, you're gonna say print the number is odd. So you're gonna save that. I'm gonna save that file as even or odd.py on my desktop, and then let me just add another statement to pause the program so that we can see the output on the terminal. So let's just write input, enter, or press enter to exit. Save that, and then open up your file. So it says enter the number. Let me write 20. It says that number is even, which is true. Then if I write 19, it says number is odd, which is again true. So this is how you're going to use if and else statements in your Python programming language. And that's all for this lecture, guys. I'll be adding more coding exercise for you to understand much better about these statements and also play around with different programs. In our upcoming lectures, we'll also be learning more about functions and constructors and that kind of stuff. And that's all for this lecture, guys. Hopefully I'll see you guys in my next lecture. Thank you. In our previous lecture, you've seen how to use if and else statements in Python to compare your conditions. In this lecture, I'm going to talk to you guys about something called as nested if, which is not different from the if statement, but it's just that you put that in different way. Basically, nested if statement is the layers of if conditions. So if the first if condition is true, it goes for the second one and goes on. So you can have unlimited nested if statements, but most of the programs will not have more than one or two. Right, let me just quickly show you guys how this is done so you'll have a better understanding. So firstly, I need a variable to compare it, and I'm gonna call it as item. Let me call it as items, not called item. Right, item is equals to fruits, perhaps, yeah. And then I'm gonna create another variable called fruit is equals to apple. And then I need an if condition, and remember to write the if condition you first need to write the if keyword and then comes your condition. So if item is equals to fruits, then it's going to do something, and if it's false it's going to do something else. So if it's false, let's just print out um, let's say this is not a fruit, yeah. And then if the if condition is true, then you're gonna add another if condition, and for that let's call it as if fruit is equals to um, apple, then it's gonna do something, and for that let's just print out this fruit is an apple. And if it's false, you're gonna write something else. So let's say print this is not this fruit is not available, something like that, just for an example, you know. And make sure you put two equals to sign because you're comparing one variable to another variable or value. If you just put one equals to sign, that's an assigning operator. I'm going to talk to you guys about more about the comparison and the assignment operators in the next lecture. Right, so once you have done that, you can go ahead and run this file. So I'm gonna run the module on the IDE. So it says this fruit is an apple because the first condition is true. It's gonna check whether the item is equal to fruits, and that's true. And it checks the next condition, which is if fruit is equal to apple, that's true as well. So it's gonna print out this statement. Let's just quickly change the values and see if it works. I'm gonna put that as an animal and save that, and then on the module. So now it says this is not a fruit because the first if statement is false, and it directly jumps onto the else statement of this if. It doesn't go to uh, the next if statement within this one. I don't know how to put that in correct sentence, but this if statement is within this one. So if the first one is false, it doesn't go into the next one. It just directly goes to the else statement. And if you change this fruits, and if you change this to something like mango, then it still does print this one. Let's see if that works. So now it says this fruit is not available because the fruit is not equals to apple, it's equals to mango, which is not true. And this is how you put the nested if statements. Hope you guys have enjoyed it, or if you guys have learned something from this lecture, and hopefully I'll see you guys in my next lecture. Thank you. Hi, in this lecture I'm going to be talking to you guys about something called as loops and how you can use them in Python. So basically, loop is something which executes a block of code multiple times without having to write it multiple times, if that makes sense. But basically, it makes it easy for the programmer to write this program. So in this lecture, I'm going to show you guys how to use a while loop and a for loop in Python. And with that said, let's get started. So firstly, open up your IDE, and to write a while loop, you need a test condition. And for test condition, you need a variable. So I'm just going to quickly create a simple variable and assign it some value like 1. And as you can see, a is equals to 1 now. And for while loop, you're going to use while as the keyword, and you have to write a test condition like how you used to do for the if statement. So you're going to say a is less than or equals to 10, and then you're going to do something. Let's say you're just going to print out a, just to keep it simple, and then you also need to increase the value of a. I'll quickly write the code and then try and explain how it works. I think that would be more easier for you to understand and also easy for me to explain. Well, anyway, so it's going to print out the numbers from 1 to 10, and let me quickly tell you guys how that works. So firstly, it's going to check if a is less than 10. As you can see here, it's a is equals to 1, and 1 is definitely less than 10. So it's going to go inside the loop, and it's going to print out a, and then it adds 1 to a, so that increases a by 1, which is 2, and it's going to go back to the statement. It checks again if a is less than or equals to 10, 2 is less than 10, that's true. So it's going to come here, print out the statement, again increase the value, so that's 3. It's going to go back, test it, and then that if that's true, it's going to go in and execute the statement. So it goes on until a is equals to 10, and when a increases the value by 1, which is 11, it's going to go here and check if 11 is less than 10. That's not true. So it's going to exit the loop statement, and it's going to print out the output. So this is how a while loop statement works in Python or in any other programming language. But this is how the syntax is. It's in Python, and I'm going to show you guys another loop statement which is very useful to iterate through a list, and that is for loop. So for loop, I'm going to create a simple list, and I'm going to call it example for now. Let's say you've got a couple of things like book, um, pen. I'm just going to write things which are on my table right now. So I'm just going to keep it very simple, and a couple of notebooks. Right. So you've got a list now, and to iterate through a list, you have to write for, and let's say you have a variable called item in example, and what you're gonna do is you're just gonna simply print out, let's say I have, I'm gonna put a space there, and item, and this should work. So basically it's going to print out have book, pen, water, notebooks. So what it does is you have a variable called item which gets assigned to every element of example when it's going through the loop. So the first, when the loop is executing for the first time, so it's going to assign the element which is in the example list, which is book, to the item, and that's going to print out, and then it goes to the next element which is pen, and that gets assigned to item and it gets printed again. So this process is going to go through until the end of the list, and when it comes to the end of the list, it's going to exit the loop. So this is how a for loop works in Python. Let me know if you guys have got any questions or queries with the loops on the discussion board, and also I'll be putting more exercises on this lecture, and also I'm going to be talking to you guys about the infinite loops and breaks in my next lecture. So until then, see you guys, bye. Hi, welcome to the lecture. In this lecture, I'm going to talk to you guys about infinite loops and how it looks and how things work with that. Well, in the previous lecture, you saw how the loop works with the while loop and also the for loop. Well, infinite loop is pretty much the same thing, but I just felt that if I could make it two different lectures, it would be more easier for you to understand, and also it'd be more easy for me to explain to you guys as well. So here it is. And yeah, so with that said, let's get started. So firstly, open up your IDE, and as I said, infinite loop is pretty much the same thing, but it's just that the test condition, how you specify, is a bit different than the actual while or for loops. So let's see how it looks like. So firstly, let's say while true, I'm just gonna write the code first, and then I'll try and explain it to you guys. So while true, let's get an input from the user. Let's say text is equals to input. Let's say enter something, yeah, and then this is where you're gonna specify the. So let me just quickly run without specifying the condition. So let me just run this. So it's asking me to enter something. So I'm just gonna enter something. So it just keeps on going because there is no condition that at what instance it has to quit from the loop. So it just keeps executing the same thing. No matter what you type, it just keeps on going. So I'm just gonna exit that forcefully, and then let me continue writing it again. While true, text equals to input, enter something, right. So now you can specify the condition. So let's say if text is equals to let's say quit, then you're gonna break from the loop. So this is the test condition. So if the user inputs quit, then that's gonna break from the loop. Let's see if this works. It's asking to enter something. Let's just keep typing something, and it just goes on. But when you type quit, that's gonna break through the loop. So this is how an infinite loop works like, and it can also break your program if you forget to add the if statement. I mean, the conditional statement, and make sure when you're typing true the T is capital, because if you type small letter T, it's not going to take it, that's going to consider it as a variable. So you need to type capital T, and be careful with that. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this lecture. Let's see what I've got in our next couple of tutorials. So till then, thank you so much guys, see you then, bye. Hi, welcome to the lecture, guys. In this lecture, I'm going to talk to you guys about something called as functions. So function is a block of code which can be used multiple times in your program without having to rewrite it again. So it's kind of like a reusable code. Yeah. Um, and I also want to say that you might have already used a function in one of your previous programs or probably in previous lectures in this course. Because remember when I asked you to write a program to calculate the GCD or LCM of a number, you you have used a method which was already in the math library, which is a function. So, but that was a function which was already defined in the library. But in this lecture, you're gonna learn how to create a function by yourself, and these are called user-defined functions. So without wasting any more time, let's just get into it. So firstly, open up your IDE, and I'm going to create a new file because I need to write a lot of lines. So to create a function, you're going to use the keyword called def, and then you need to specify the function name. So let's say, for example, I'm just going to keep it simple, and you're going to put two parentheses there and then a colon. And once you've done that, you're just going to simply write what the function is going to do. Since I kept the name as simple, so I'm going to keep it simple as well. So I'm just going to simply print out a function, and that's it. So you've got a function which has been defined by you. Now if you want to use this function in your program, you just need to call the function name. So since the function name is simple, I'm going to write the function name and add two parentheses there, and then you just need to save it. So I'm going to call it functions.py, and when I run it in my IDE, I get to see what the function does. So it says I'm a function. So this is a simple way how you can create a function, and obviously this function really doesn't do anything much. So let's see if we can create some more advanced functions. So I'm going to create a function which would convert GBP to US dollars. So, and I'm going to call it GBP to USD, and then I'm going to say I found that 1 GBP is equals to about 1.5 US dollars. So I'm going to say USD is equals to GBP times 1.5. Yeah, and then I need to print out USD. Now you might be wondering, how could you get to know how what the value of GBP is when the user enters? So that's when another term comes in that's called parameters. Now parameter is something which you put with the function that can be used inside the function. Let me not try and confuse you guys. Let me keep it very simple. It's basically a variable which the user enters um, while running the program, and then using that value, the function computes its operation and then returns the result. So to specify a parameter, you just need to write the variable name or the parameter name. So in here, I'm just going to keep it GBP to make it more simple to read and also understand. So I'm just going to call my parameter as GBP, and so that's the function. To use the function, you just need to call the function, as I said in the previous example. So it's just the function name, and then now you need to specify the value. So if you put 5, what it's going to do is it's going to take the value 5, and that's going to assign this value to this variable GBP, and then this variable can be used here to compute USD, and then it's going to print out USD value on the screen. So let's see if that works. So I'm going to save it and run it. Wow, so that works. So 5 GBP is equal to $7.5. Another topic which I wanted to talk to you guys in this lecture is about the return statement. So basically, a return statement is something which is used in the function again, and this return statement returns the value that you want to send it back to the place where the function was called. Usually, the return statement is used to return the value of the result that has been computed during the function operation. And let's see how you can use it in the function in this lecture. So we'll just take the same example. In here, instead of printing the USD value, let's just return the value of USD back to the place. So let's say return, sorry, so return USD. So that's it. So you're gonna return the value of USD back to the place where it came from. Now when you're returning the value, it has to be stored in some value in the main function. So you're just gonna write some variable, let's say a. Usually you can just keep it USD as well, so it's not gonna overlap. So you can keep USD equals to GBP to USD. Now what it's gonna, now as I said, it's gonna return the value of USD back to this variable, but there is no print statement here. So we'll just quickly write a print statement to print the value of USD, and let's see if it works. And that works. So we'll just put a few more just to make sure you understand, guys. So I'll just say 5.2 and 10. Save it, and then when you run the module, that's gonna give you the answer. So you've got $15 for 10 parts. That's not bad. Right, so this is the lecture about the functions and a bit more detail about how you can use the function with parameters. In our next lecture, let's see if we can talk more about functions or any other topic, and until then, see you guys. Bye. Hi, in our previous lecture, we talked about functions and how you can use them in your program. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about more about functions, mainly about the parameters of adding multiple parameters to the same function to get more values from the user, and so that you can use more functions in the same, more operations in the same functions. So with that said, let's get started. So firstly, I'm going to create a function in the IDE itself so that this one is more about changing the definition of the function, so I'll just do it on here. So to create a function, you need to write the def and write the function name. So I'm just gonna call it print name, and then I'm just gonna print whatever I get from the user. So I'm gonna create a parameter called name, and then I'm gonna print name. So let's see if this works. Print name, and then I'm gonna say Gautam. So that works. And now, what if you wanna add more names into the same function? Let's say you wanna print more names from this function. Let's say Gautam, uh, Tom. That doesn't work because that function can only take one argument or one parameter. It can't take more than one or less than one. It has to be a perfect one. So let's see how you can make it more uh, make it more reliable and make it more easy to use. So you're gonna have to change the function definition, which would be like this. So write the function name, and then when you're adding the parameter, just add a asterisk before it. So what it does is it's a pointer for all the values that the user enters. So it's going to create a list of those parameters. So basically, I'm going to write the function, then let me try and explain it to you guys. So let me see if I can print the name. So if I want to print more names, I'm gonna write Gautam, Tom, I don't know, number one. I don't know if there's a name like that, but yeah. So this is how the parameters or the list looks. So it's gonna create all the parameters into a list, and then it's gonna assign indexes for each of it. So if you wanna access this value, you're just gonna write name and with the index 1. So let me just quickly show you guys how you can do it. Print name, asterisk name, and then if you want to access the first element of the list, so you're just gonna put 1 in there. So that's gonna get you, I'm sorry, you're gonna put 0 in there. So that's gonna get you the first element of the list. So when you type the function and you have the values, um, actually just write 2 3. So that's going to give you the first value of that list. Now this is one way of adding the multiple parameters into the function. The another way is you can write um, you can write two different variables to store the values. Let's say you have name 1 and name 2, if that makes sense. So it doesn't really make sense if you want same kind of data in two different variables. It doesn't really make sense. So I'm just gonna keep it name and age. So that would be much more easier to read it. So I'm just gonna change the function definition. So you have the function with two variables, that is two different parameters, and you're gonna print them. So let's say name, and then print age. Yeah. So let's see if it works. Print name, um, scout them, and the age. So you got name and age printed out. So this is how you're gonna use multiple parameters in a function. Let me know if you guys didn't understand what the pointer is or how it stores more values in the same variable. Let me know on the discussion session. I'll try and explain it more clearly on this specific question. But other than that, this is how you use multiple parameters in a function. Hi, in this lecture, I'm going to talk to you guys about classes, objects, and methods. Now, this topic can be a bit conceptual, but I'll try and explain it in a simpler way I can. So just bear with me. So class is basically a block of code which has got functions, attributes, and the functions which are inside the class, they call it methods. I'm going to explain that in a minute. But yeah, so class has got a lot of functions and a lot of different operations that can be used in your program. Now class is also can be told as a template. So you can use this template, which is like a library of a lot of functions, not only with your program, it can be used with all the other programs which needs to access your functions and uh, carry out different operations in them. So let me not make it very complex. I'll quickly show you guys how to write a class in Python. So I'll try and explain on the way while we're building it, the objects and different methods for it. Another term which I want to talk before writing the class is the object. So basically, object is like an instance of a class. It gives you access to all the methods or variables which are inside the class. Let's say, for example, you have a class called um, phone, and you have an object for it. And basically, when you want to access the variable or the function, or I mean the methods inside the class, you just use the period, and then you write the name of the variable or the method which is already in it. And these are called attributes of a class. Let's say, for example, you have an attribute of the phone for size, or you can say RAM, memory, or any sort of thing. So these are the attributes that has for this object. And yeah, let's see how you can build a class now. So basically, open up a new file, and then I'm gonna create a new class. To create a new class, just write the keyword class and then write the class name. I'm gonna create a very simple one, so I'm just gonna keep it calculator. So you've got a class called calculator, and I'm gonna add few methods for it. So writing a method inside the class is pretty much the same as how you create a function. So just write def and then the function name. So I'm gonna create a function called add, and so to add two numbers, so I'm gonna say a and b, and then you return the value of it, right? And then I'm gonna create another one, um, a and b again, but you're gonna return the subtraction of it. Okay, so whenever you create a method in the class, you need another um, parameter called self. So basically, self is like a temporary object for this class. Again, it gives you access to all the variables and functions of it. So just keep the first parameters as self when you're creating a method. So let's see if this class works. I'll quickly save this. Let me call it class.py, and then when you run this module, now the class has been um, imported to this IDE. Now what you need to do is you need to create an object. You need to create an instance for this class, and for that I'll just write the object name. So I'll keep the object name as calc, and then equals to, I'm gonna write the class name, which is calculator, and then add two parentheses. Then when you press enter, that's going to give you the object with that class. Now you can access all the methods and variables within that class. So to access the method, which is add, just write the object and then add a period, and then write the function name, I mean the method name. So let's say you want to add 5 and 2. Now remember, if you're not printing anything, so I'm gonna save this value to a variable, so called result. So now I'm gonna get the addition of 5 and 2 into the result. Now let me print out result. Yeah, so this is how you do this is how you get access the methods which are in the function. Let me just quickly show you another example. So if you want to access the subtraction, just write sub and 5 and 2, press enter, and as you can see, that's the result. So that's all for this lecture, guys. That's how you create class and add methods and variables to it. Let me know if you have got any doubts or questions in the discussion session. I'll try and keep an eye on that because it's a bit confusing concept. So I'll try and reply as soon as possible. And in our next lecture, we'll be working on file system using Python. So that might be very exciting. So I'll see you in the next lecture. Bye. Hi, welcome to the lecture. In our previous lecture, you saw how to create a class and also build objects for it to access its methods and also variables. In this lecture, I'm going to try and explain you more about these classes. So I'm going to give you a situation where you have two or more classes and you want to extend that class into another class so that you can use all the methods and variables you have in class 1 and class 2 in class 3. Can you do it? Well, of course you can do it in Python. So I'm going to quickly show you guys how you can do it, and yeah, let's get started with that. So open up your IDE, and then to create the class, you're going to use the class keyword, and let me call it as class 1, and I just create a variable 1 equals to, let's say, um, class 1, and then I'm going to create another class, class 2, and again create another variable. Make sure you have two different variables because you're extending it. um, so I'm going to say um, class 2, and then finally I just create another class, class 3, and now you want to use the variables which you have in class 1 and class 2 and class 3. So you're just going to simply write the class names. So class 1 and you want class 2. So simply add that as a parameters inside those two parentheses, and then I'm going to simply create another variable, or you can just type pass. Pass simply means that don't do anything because you don't want to do anything. But well, I'll just create another variable just to make sure that the class 3 variable can be accessed. Class 3, yeah, and now create an object. Let's say example equals to class 3 and 2 parentheses there. So now if you want to access the variable 1 which was in class 1, you just have to write the variable name, and that's it. So you can see it can access the variable which was in class 1, and the same way it can do the same thing for variable 2 in the class 2, and then finally the class 3. So there you go. So this is how you extend the class into another class to access all the methods and the variables. You can again access the methods as well if it's in class 1 or class 2. It's not just variables. So this is how you extend it, and that's pretty much it for this lecture. I know it's a really short lecture, but I just want to quickly explain you guys about this concept. In our next tutorial or next lecture, let's talk about a file system using Python. So we'll see how to read and write into files and everything. So until then, see you. Bye. Hi, welcome to the lecture, guys. As I said in my previous lecture, we're going to be working with file handling in this lecture. So we're going to see how to read or write data into the file. Before doing that, I've already created a file in my G drive named it as test, which is a text file. And let's get started. Let's see how you can read or write into the file. So before that, you need to have a file object which handles all the file operations like read or write. And to do that, you need to specify the object name. I'll just keep it as file in here, and then equals to, and then you're gonna use an inbuilt function called open, and this function is going to take two parameters. So firstly, the path to the file. So in here, um, my file is located in G drive and it's named as test.txt, and then the second parameter would be the mode in which the file needs to be opened. Let's say you want to add data into the file, so you're going to open it in write mode, and if you want to read the information from the file, you're going to open it in read mode. Now since there is no information in the file, let's see if we can write some data into it. So I'm going to open it in write mode, and then now you've created the file object. To write data into the file, you just have to specify the file object and a period, and then write the function write, and this is also an inbuilt function. So write the function right, and then you just have to specify what the data would be. So I'll just give it, this is my first file, right? So that's the number of bytes that has been written into the file. Now, to read the data from the file, you have to open it in read mode. Now, you need to close the file and then reopen it in read mode. Remember, whenever you've done all the file operation, you are very much indeed needed to close the file. Yeah. So close the file, open it again in read mode. So specify the path to the file, which is G drive text, and then open it in read mode, right? And now to read a file, so just type file object and then read, and it can take a parameter, it can take the number of bytes you want to read. Let's say you want to read 10 bytes of data, which is already in there. So that's going to read 10 bytes from the beginning, and that's 10 bytes from there. And if you want to read the complete thing, you don't have to specify any parameters there. So that's the next, that's the thing from the after 10 bytes. If you didn't specify anything here, it would have read the complete file. But since it has already read 10 bytes, it's gonna take it from, it's gonna take the cursor from there till the end of the file. So that's all for this lecture, guys. In our next lecture, let's talk more about reading and writing the files, and also let's see how to move the cursor to end of the file or to the beginning of the file. And I'll see you guys in my next lecture. Bye. Hi, welcome to the lecture, guys. In our previous lecture, we saw how to create a file object, how to add and read contents from the file. And in this lecture, I'm going to talk to you guys more about the read and write functions again. So I'm going to quickly show you guys the more functions they can use with the file objects, which can carry out different operations. And with that said, let's get started. But before that, I need to show you guys how my file is set up. So my file is in G drive, and I've got just one line written in the file. So let's see how to use more functions on this file. So firstly, create a file object. So I'm going to use the open inbuilt function. It takes two parameters. The first one is the path to the file, which is G drive for my case, and it's called test.txt. And let's see the read functions first. So I'm going to open it in read mode, and to read the contents of the file, to read all the contents of the file, so you just read the read function. So when you press enter, that's going to read the complete data which is already in the file. The other function which I want to talk to you guys is the read line function. So if you type the file, the object, and then if you type read line, that's going to read just one line from the file. So if you press enter, that should have read the that should have read a line from the file, but since that you've already read all the contents using this function in your previous instruction, that's gonna set the cursor to the end of the file. To move the cursor back to the place where you want it to be, you're gonna use another function called seek. So if you type file.seek and then if you specify 0, that's gonna take you to the beginning of the file. So that's the number of bytes you want to shift the cursor to. So if you press enter, and if you use the file.read line now, that's gonna read one line from the file. Now let's add a few more lines to this file. Let's say this is my second line, third line, then fourth line. And if you save it, now let's see if this works. So first I need to close the file, then reopen it because I just saved it. And so I'm gonna call it file.open, and right. So if you type file.readline now, just to show you guys that it just reads one line, So if you press enter, so that's the first line. Another function which I want to talk to you guys is the read lines function. So if you go back to the beginning of the file, and then if you type file.read lines instead of read line, that's going to read all the lines, but it's going to create a list of each line. So the first line is the first element in this list, and the second line is the second element in the list, and it just goes on. So the delimiter is the new line character, which is \n. So whenever it finds a \n in the line, it just puts the next line as the new element in the list. Now using this function, you can edit the lines and then put it back to the file. So let's see how to edit the content which is already in the file. So I'm gonna quickly close this file and reopen it in write mode. Oh, actually, I'm gonna save this data into a variable and then reopen it in write mode. So I think that would make more sense. So to save the contents to a list, so let me just type list data equals to file dot read. First I need to change the cursor, so file dot seek 0, and then um, list data equals to file dot read lines, and that's going to create a list, and that's saved into this variable. Now let's use the write function to put this content back to the file. Before that, let's just quickly edit one of the line. So list data, and let's edit the third line. So that's 2 equals to let's say um, third line edited. Now if you close the file using the close function and then reopen it again using the write mode, so that's G drive test and then write mode. So now you can write the lines back to the file. I'm gonna quickly close this file because it's using it from the Python shell. So file dot write lines, and then you just pass the list as the parameter. So that's list data. Now it's gonna write all the contents that was in the list data to the file. Now remember, the list data, the third element didn't have a \n, so the fourth line and the third line will be concatenated, if that's right. So if you open the file here, actually you need to close the file. So if you type file.close and then if you reopen the file, that's going to give you the edited line, and since we didn't put the \n, the fourth line and third line has been uh, concatenated or joined. So this is how you use a couple of other functions with the file object, which gives you uh, more ability to carry out more certain operations. And that's all for this lecture, guys. Let me know if you guys have any doubts. I feel this lecture has been a bit long one compared to other ones, but yeah, I want to talk to you guys about these functions because it's pretty important. So that's all for this lecture, guys. Let's see what we have in our next lecture. Until then, bye.